It's the 1950s. America is enjoying an economic boom. Hollywood is making millions. Teenagers are flipping burgers and driving souped-up Fords. It seems like the world is turning towards a brave new era of prosperity and peace. But what if we told you that, across the pond, the decade began with hardship and struggle? Welcome to life in Britain, the real 1950 UK. The year was 1950. The Second World War had ended 5 years earlier. But life in the UK was far from easy. The cities were still healing. Buildings bombed, streets cracked, families broken. But the British people, they were strong, resilient, proud. Most homes were cold. There was no central heating. People relied on coal fires in the living room and extra blankets at night. Windows still had tape marks from the Blitz. Bathing was once a week, often in a tin tub in front of the fireplace. Food rationing was still in full force. In fact, bread, the most basic of items, was still rationed until 1956. Bananas, a luxury. Meat, only with coupons. A roast dinner was a real treat, not a weekly habit. People cooked everything from scratch. Boiled potatoes, cabbage, suet puddings. Mothers were experts at making dew. There were no freezers and ridges were rare. Leftovers were reused, never wasted. A full-time mother was the backbone of the household. She took care of the children, the home, mended clothes, and prepared food with whatever was available. And somehow she made it all look effortless. Weekends were for the family. Fathers and children might play football in the park, while mothers socialized and kept an eye out for American soldiers. These men brought both excitement and danger. The G's had money to spend, and they weren't shy about it. They also brought a taste of America: Coca-Cola, cigarettes, and chewing gum. Teenagers gathered at bus stops and railway stations, hoping to catch a glimpse of the troops. But don't be fooled into thinking it was all fun and games. Britain in the 1950s was a very different place for black people. The Windrush generation arrived from the Caribbean, expecting a land of opportunity. Instead, they faced suspicion, prejudice, and outright racism. The one thing every home had was a wireless radio. A treasured possession with only one station, the BBC. This was their source of news, music, and stories. At 8 p.m. each evening, the family would gather round to listen to the news. The wireless became the focal point of the home. The BBC also provided entertainment. Shows like Take It Easy, Dad and Mrs. Dale's Diary were the top radio programs. Comedy and variety shows were popular, too, with stars like Norman Wisdom, Benny Hill, and The Goon Show. On Christmas morning, everyone would wake up early to listen to the King's speech on the wireless. It was a highlight of the festive season. If you wanted to hear the latest American hits, you needed a record player. Elvis, Chuck Berry, and Little Richard were soon making the British charts. Skiffle groups sprung up all over the country, playing a mixture of jazz, blues, and folk music. You didn't need an orchestra to dance the night away. Outside, the streets were their playground. Children played hopscotch, marbles, or riding their bikes. They made their own fun with a stick, a ball, an old box. Children wore hand-me-down clothes, often with homemade shoes. Some children wore clogs, a type of wooden shoe with a leather strap. They were practical and cheap. But the best thing about childhood in the 1950s was the freedom. Children roamed the streets, played by the river, climbed trees, built dens. They were out of school and out of adult sight. They were free. How did people keep fit in the 1950s? Well, they didn't go to gyms or workout classes. That's not to say they were lazy. They just enjoyed sports and outdoor activities. Football was the most popular sport in the 1950s, followed by cricket and rugby. People went to watch these sports or played them in the park. Cycling was another favorite pastime. It was a great way to explore the countryside and keep fit. Swimming was popular in the summer months, and many seaside towns had open-air pools. People would take the train to the coast, spend the day swimming and sunbathing, then take the train home again. It wasn't unusual for a family to holiday at home. Britain has some beautiful countryside, after all. The Lake District, the Yorkshire Wolds, the Scottish Highlands. Why travel abroad when you have all this beauty on your doorstep? Families packed up the car and toured the country, stopping off at quaint villages, hiking, picnicking, exploring. What's your favorite memory of the 1950s? Do you have any photos or videos you'd like to share? Please leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time. The 1950s, a time of significant change and challenges following the aftermath of the Second World War. Britain was in a state of recovery and rebuilding. But it was also a time of hope and optimism as the country looked to the future. But what was everyday life really like? What did people do for fun? How did they relax? What did they talk about? And what did they think about the future? Welcome to Time Vault. Today, we are taking a journey back to the 1950s to explore the reality of life in a typical British town. We'll be sharing fascinating insights into the daily lives of ordinary people and the challenges they faced. Join us as we uncover the secrets of what life was really like in the 1950s. Men would typically work in factories, on the railways, in coal mines, or helping to rebuild cities. Women were expected to take care of the home, so they cooked, cleaned, and washed everything by hand. There was no such thing as a washing machine. Many women had started working, too, especially after the war, when many men had died and there were few men to be had. Widows with young children were forced to leave their mourning clothes and become the family breadwinner. Yet, despite all the hardship, there was hope. The NHS was only 2 years old. People were finally getting free healthcare. Council housing was expanding, and children were being born into a country that, for the first time in years, wasn't at war. Families didn't have much, but what they had, they cherished. A hot cup of tea, a quiet evening by the fire, a Sunday walk in the park, and neighbors. They weren't just neighbors. They were family. Life in the 1950s was not without its challenges. Rationing had only ended in 1948, and food was still in short supply. Clothes were mended and made to last. Entertainment was limited, and cars were a rare sight on the roads. But despite these hardships, the 1950s was a time of great optimism and hope for the future. The post-war generation was growing up, and they had a new NHS to keep them healthy, a new welfare state to look after them if they needed it, and a growing economy that provided them with jobs and a higher standard of living. They were also part of a new Britain that was engaged in the world and making its mark on the global stage. The 1950s was a time when Britain was rebuilding itself, and its people were determined to make it a better place to live, despite the challenges they faced. The people of Britain in the 1950s had a strong sense of community and togetherness. They knew that they had been through something terrible as a nation, and they were determined to build a better future together. The end of World War II had left Britain and the rest of the world in a state of uncertainty. But as the decades passed and the wounds of war began to heal, people started to look towards the future with hope and optimism. The 1950s was a time of economic recovery and growth in Britain, and this led to an increase in the standard of living for many people. New technologies and innovations were developed, and this created new jobs and opportunities for people. It was a time when people were optimistic about the future, and they were hopeful that things would continue to get better. People in Britain during the 1950s were also proud of their country and its achievements. Despite the challenges that Britain had faced during and after the war, people were proud of the role that their country had played in defeating fascism and in rebuilding Europe. In conclusion, the 1950s was a time of significant change and challenges in Britain, following the aftermath of the Second World War. But despite the hardships faced by the people of Britain during this era, there was still a sense of hope and optimism for the future. The post-war generation was determined to build a better world, and they embraced the challenges of the 1950s with a sense of unity and resilience. Their stories are a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the importance of community and togetherness in the face of adversity. Do you have any memories of the 1950s that you'd like to share? Perhaps you grew up in this era, or maybe you heard stories from your grandparents. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If this video brought back any memories for you, please give it a thumbs up to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss out on our latest videos. Stay tuned for more historical tales and nostalgic journeys. Thank you for watching.